So I was talking about your book, just in case people don't know. Linda is the author of this Officer Involved Spouse book. And I've kind of been following your page for a while. So, and you sent me this lovely book, and it's been fun to I haven't read the whole thing, but I've read some of it. So whoever's joining us, if you guys have questions, you can ask while you're on. And then also this will be available if you don't get to finish on IGTV after. So, so I guess so just introduce ourselves, Linda, if you don't mind going first.
Sure. First and foremost, I'm my kid's mom. We've been married for 32 years. We have 3 kids. We have 2 son-in-laws and 3, almost 4 grandbabies. So we're definitely empty nesters and enjoying this part of our life. We've always been in service professions. You know, Brian was an officer for 32 years. He started LAPD, and then he transferred to Huntington Beach. And then I was a stay-at-home mom for a long time until my youngest was in 1st grade. And then I went into the school district and trained to become a behavior tutor for children with autism. And so I was there for 17 years, the whole time my kids were in school. And so we've always kind of been in service professions. We've always kind of loved psychology. So when the kids started leaving, we went into lay counseling with our church. And from there, we just kept training in the counseling field, lay counseling field, coaching, mentoring, because we just love to help people. And so what became of that was peaks and valleys, because we figured we needed something to put everything under.
I just muted myself while you were talking because my kids are here and they're talking to the side of me. So
that's okay.
But that's awesome. And we kind of have, I think the service thing in common, because I was a social worker and now I'm a professor and still do a lot of service for people with disabilities. That's specifically my passion that I don't talk a lot about on here. But that's awesome. And that's cool. Yeah, I didn't know your husband also was with LAPD for a little bit too.
Yes, started out 6 years. His dad, he was a legacy because his dad was there for, I think, 30 years. So,
yeah, that's awesome. Rick's dad was a cop too, but in Las Vegas for at least 20 years, I think.
Maybe really? Okay, wow. See, yeah, it tends to follow in the family sometimes.
Yeah, I think so, yeah.
I'm excited to see what the major concerns are out there and what everyone is really wondering about, what everyone is really struggling with, and I just hope I can help.
Yeah, that's why I was so happy to have you on here today. We can start with the questions that I got before, and then if anyone writes in, we'll prioritize theirs as well. So the first one was prioritizing tasks and people on days off. So I don't know the background behind the question, but I don't know if you want to address that.
It sounds like something that I've heard a lot. And I think that that's why we promote doing a calendar so much. And I know that in this day and age, we're very digitally sound. We know how to do our calendars and link them on our phones and stuff like that. But I really think that I know that a big old-fashioned paper calendar is really what is required for a family like this in law enforcement, because you've got so many people going different directions. Sometimes their shifts are consistent and sometimes they're not. And quite honestly, I have 3 little kids running around at home. I couldn't keep it straight. I would either ask him a million times or I would just write it on the big old calendar where everyone could see when Dad was going to come home. And so I think that's a good start to prioritizing things, because when you see it, there's something about when your brain sees something written down, then it's important to you, but then your spouse also knows it's important to them too. And I think that that's one of the first ways to prioritize, is to make certain you've got it written down somewhere so that your officer husband, I mean, if I'm talking to women here, so that your officer husband knows that it looks like he's working all week and you have nothing on your calendar. You need to prioritize your self-care. You need to prioritize your workouts. If he has to wake up a half an hour early so that you can go out and do your run or get your walk in, then that's what needs to happen. I mean, in a marriage, you have to sacrifice a little bit both ways. And I think the police spouse definitely does sacrifice for the life of a police family, which is not bad. It's not bad. It's just you've got to get into a good regiment and have a voice for yourself.
Yeah. So I was just out this morning with a fellow police officer wife, and she asked me, we went to the zoo, and she asked me, like, do you feel bad that you get to experience these things without, your husband? And I said, no, but I don't mean that I don't feel bad. I just mean, like, it's so normal. My oldest is 6, so for 6 years, it's just been normal that I go out and do fun things. But, like, I texted her after, and I was like, I feel like I was insensitive, like, of course, I plan and Rick plans things that like we do as a family of 4, but I do a lot without him. But it makes me like sane, to like know, okay, like he's working his next 4 or 5 days, and I have these things going on. Like you said, self-care is so important. Yeah. And for me, it's like just getting out and being social is important for me. So
right. Well, I think too. We promote a lot in our marriage courses. We don't do a marriage course for law enforcement right now because we meet couples in person, and we found that typically law enforcement officers don't want to meet in a group in person. So that's fine. That's why I wrote Officer Involved Spouse. But when we do meet, we tend to tell people to have a marriage meeting, have a family meeting once a week so that you can go to your calendar and write those things down and let each other know what's important. But also so that you can set some goals for yourself. So you have something to look forward to. And I think that way you're not turning bitter. Yeah, because that can happen very easily.
Yeah. I know. I really liked that in your book, but I think I took it more long term. But now when you're saying it, I can see the short term too. But you were talking about like goals. And I was thinking, Rick and I plan long-term goals too, like so that you can see, like maybe right now, like early on our marriage was the hardest. The first like couple years, we're kind of like not doing great financially and stuff. And it's like changed now, but you can see the future, like, okay, this is a season. And I think the longer you're married, you see that like that it was just a season. But when you're like at the very beginning, I think that's the hardest. And like having a plan for what's happening in the future, like we're still very much like that, like just goals together as a family. But I can see it. I was thinking long term, but now I see what you're saying. Like the short term goals are good too.
Yeah. So Family Behind the Badge. The book name is Officer Involved Spouse. And you can get it in my LinkedIn profile at Peaks and Valleys. So. Yeah. 1 year, 3 year, 5 year goals are good. But like you said, when you're just starting out, do 2 month, 4 month, 6 month goals. Sometimes you do have to shorten them, but it is always one thing in psychology. It's like you want to know that you have hope. Like you can do a lot with hope. So if I'm hopeful that in 2 months, I'm going to have a babysitter for the weekend, or I'm going to go on a women's retreat, or I'm going to be able to, go out with my husband, just the two of us, for a whole day. I can get through. I could stand on my head for, weeks if I knew that was coming. Does that make sense?
Yeah. Definitely. Yeah, I'm always looking forward to Rick's days off. Like, I think the day before his days off, like, I'm like, I just more relaxed. Okay, tomorrow I'll be home. And I know it's like, I couldn't survive as a military spouse. I don't know how they do it. They're amazing because they go forever.
I know, they really do.
So, did you want to say anything else about like prioritizing tasks and people on days off? I mean, I think that those were really good tips.
We've had a lot of couples come to us, and the task thing was the biggest complaint in their marriage. And I'm just gonna say I am not I'm not promoting that. I'm all for the women, but I just have to say, when the women write down their tasks for the week or day, and then the husband writes down how many they have, it's very visual. I mean, it's very apparent that the wife, if you're a stay-at-home mom, you're doing a ton of stuff. So tasks, I think if you just literally write them down, write down everything you do, write down everything he does, and that just that visual again really can show you like, wow, she's doing a lot, or wow, he's doing a lot, and how can we help each other out with these tasks. Sometimes it's good to have a task list with your calendar. After this, I will go ahead and share again the calendar that I like to use. It's got pretty much everything that you want for your family. It's got meal planning. It's not mine. I wish it was. Meal planning, prayer requests, goals, and tasks. And so you can, it's right there. It's right in front of your face. You can kind of see who's responsible for what and how can you help me out with this, that, or the other. As far as people, I think that, and this goes into another area that I was going to talk about too, but just to make sure that your friends are diverse, that officers just aren't friends with officers, and wives, you're not just friends with other spouses that are law enforcement spouses. You're going to want to have friends from your kids' school or your neighborhood or your church or any group that you're in, and diversify your friends, because if you're saying that you're not prioritized as a wife or as a husband, it might be because your officer doesn't know how to share with you. And so they start sharing more at work, and then they start talking more at work, and all of a sudden you feel empty and alone and like not worth the time for them to speak to you. So I think if you have a lot of different friends, then you can have different perspectives, and then your officer can have different perspectives too, which is always good. It's always good to kind of see how other marriages run, especially if you admire them and look up to them. And that's another promotion for like getting yourself a mentor marriage, or just a mentor, an individual mentor, and making sure that you connect with people who can guide you and lead you in the right direction.
I feel like, oh, my eyes just got crazy in this filter thing.
Oh, yeah.
Let me go out and come back in. Let's see. Okay, I don't know why. Anyway, I'll just keep talking even though
I have no filter because I'm like 53 and I don't know how to do that kind of stuff. So.
I don't know what happened. I probably bumped something. Anyway,
you kind of look like a cat a little bit.
Let me see if I can adjust it. It's so weird. Sorry, you guys. Hopefully, I'll switch it. It's gonna get crazy, you guys. I'm gonna switch it to the middle and back. Oh, now I'm just frozen. Okay, switched it. I think I look normal now, but it's kind of slow. Okay, sorry, you guys. So, but I feel like you were kind of touching on communication, and there was just somebody that was messaging me about communication. I can't remember if I messaged you to tell you that, but I thought that was a tough one for me to answer because my husband's not a talker, and so I felt like my tips, I'm just curious what yours are.
So I'm a big Enneagram fan, and the only reason is because we've met for the past probably 14 years. We've met with couples, and at the beginning we were going through other personality profiles with couples. And mind you, when we mentor or coach, we don't have a bunch of paperwork you have to fill out. The only thing that we kind of drill down in is figure out your personality and figure out your spouse's personality, because I think if you do that, you're more able to communicate. So I'll give you a for instance. For instance, when we travel, I don't know if I wrote this in the book or not, but anyway, not even when we travel, just my personality. I'm a 4 on the Enneagram, if anyone knows what a 4 is. We're introverted, we're individualists, we really like organization. We kind of put our stamp and our name on everything that we do. So it's very important. And even the details are important, which people are like, I don't understand why that's so important to you. But anyway, so when we go on vacation, sometimes early on, Brian I would lay all the food out and the drinks and the, suitcases and everything that we needed. And I'd run back in the house to get one more thing. And he has already started just throwing the stuff in the back of the truck. So I end up with smashed bread and, smashed chips and things that were cold that were supposed to be in the cooler, and he's now just put them in a bag and thrown them in. And I'm like, and in my mind, I was like, that is so disrespectful. Like, I can't believe he's doing that. That he is doing that against me because he doesn't think that the way I do it is important. And it wasn't until I dug into the Enneagram that I was like, okay, I need details. And he is an 8 on the Enneagram, and he does not need details. He just needs management. Just get it done. It just needs to be done. So I like to Tetris pack, like heavy stuff on the bottom, like there's a place for everything and everything's in its place. And I think so when we figured out our Enneagram, then I could actually say, okay, so you're not throwing the stuff in the truck to do something like against me or not understand me. You're actually doing it out of your own personality. Like, that's how you work. So then I could talk to him differently. Hey, I know that these details aren't important to you, but I've got time, so I'm going to go ahead and load the truck if that's okay with you. And so it's just like a front loading. And I saw someone say, like, what the heck is the Enneagram? How do I do that? So enneagraminstitute.org, and I can post that again on my thing, but there's 9 types. And if you're a Christian and you're listening to me right now and you're gagging because I'm talking about the Enneagram, I'm so sorry. A lot of people think it's just this like a satanic thing. I don't know. To those people, I would say, do you put up Christmas trees? Do you celebrate Christmas on the 25th? I mean, there's a lot of things that we can take down the wrong road. But if you just pull the basics from the Enneagram, like, okay, this is what I naturally do. We have found in the last 12 years meeting with couples that it softens communication, because you're investigating your spouse's personality to learn how to talk to them, and they're investigating yours. So that's what I say about communication.
Oh, that's awesome. Can you take that test for free online or something? Someone was asking about how to take it.
Yes, you can totally take it free. You can also take a very involved one that costs like $12, but you can definitely take it for free. Mm-hmm.
Okay, awesome. My husband is on the chat, so ignore his comments because he's kind of a goofball. And then okay. There are a lot of, it's funny, I love your packing example, like, because it's like, these are things over time that you learn about your spouse. Like Rick, he is very organized actually with the packing into the car. So I don't touch it. Like, I'll just put everything by the door, and it's like a puzzle for him, and he like puts it in perfectly. But I like to pack the kids' stuff like in the suitcases. So it's, everybody has their role, but you know, it took us time to like figure out what worked. So
that's awesome.
And then there was another comment about that. So I think people like relate to that example a lot.
They like that example. Yeah. I mean, and the other thing I'll say too is that we meet with a lot of couples who come in with tons of different conflicts, which can be solved with communication, but they don't know how to communicate. So I would say that probably 50% of the people that we meet with that have major conflicts, we ask them, have you talked about it? Or how have you talked about it? And they always say, oh no, we never talk about that because it'll start a fight. And we say, great, start a fight. Like love, the opposite of love is apathy. It's not anger. Like if you have a little bit of anger, you're still in the game. Like, do it, walk through it, figure out how to talk about it, but also understand that anger is a secondary emotion. Mm-hmm. So it always has its base somewhere else. So if you guys are getting mad at each other and you're not able to talk, it means that you haven't dug down deep enough to find out what the real core issue is. Are you disappointed? Are you hurt? Did I embarrass you? Mm-hmm. Do you feel shame? Do you feel guilt? Mm-hmm. Are you sad? You know, those are the kind of questions that get down below anger, and then you can solve it a little bit better.
Yeah, I like that. I feel like I'm writing notes on what you're saying, and I want to like summarize it for people that won't watch this later, so I might do that. That's awesome. Yeah. So my husband is Calvin Maximus in the chat. If you guys can see it, I am the talker. He's joking. was joking. Okay. So let's get to the next one that someone had asked. They said, oh, so someone said that their spouse wanted to continue working even after being, I think, eligible for retirement.
Uh-huh.
And then I don't know. Yeah, I'm just curious. Again,
Yeah.
we don't know like behind what's behind that, but
Right. Right. Well, I've heard that a lot, and I think, I mean, I've never been one to sugarcoat things, so I'll just say it. Like some police officers, they need to get a life, like get another life besides police work, because I think it's very scary, right, Calvin? um, it's very scary to think I'm gonna leave my career as a police officer. No, I can't. I can't do that. That's how I identify myself, and I think that that is very dangerous. And those are the officers that have a big problem after retirement. So again, diversify your friends. Make sure you have a lot of different groups that you're in. And also, as a wife and a spouse, encourage them in the other talents and gifts that they do have, because they're not just a police officer. They're you got to go to work. Okay, go to work, Calvin.
yeah. Yes, bye. It was wonderful having you here. I love you.
And so I think it's always good to, and we say like, encourage your spouse every day, especially if you have your kids around. Say, oh my gosh, you're such a great dad, or like, wow, you can do woodworking. That's so cool. That's another task that you have. I mean, let's support our spouses in something as well as police work. They have other talents. Like Brian retired, but about a year before he retired, he started his own private investigative firm on his own. And so he retired, but went right back to work part-time. It made him feel purposeful. He knew what he was doing. He can do it out of our home. So it's not like you have to be in the department anymore. And honestly, if you never retire from that job, you never calm down, because it literally took him about 18 months to be able to sleep fully again and to really be able to rest. And so you need that. You don't want your police officer husband who just retired to be ill or have a heart attack, or like, you gotta give yourself time, and you are not just your job.
Yeah, I think that's a really, really good point.
Mhm.
Yeah, I know. I didn't really know what to say to that, but I think, yeah, they just get used to that life. And like you said, that's part of an identity. So it can be, I think that is true for a lot of people in retirement period, you know?
Mhm.
So having
I think it
something
is,
else.
yeah.
Hmm.
Mhm.
Yeah. And I guess as women, like I work, but I'm more the primary caregiver for my kids. So that's always been an identity. But obviously someday they won't need me as much. So I always say that's when I'll probably work more, when they don't need me as much, actually. But yeah, having other things. And then I was thinking of that like planning thing, because Rick and I always talk about what we want to do in retirement, actually. Like we're already planning, even though it's so far away. So I think that those are things just like as a couple that you can talk about.
That's good. Mhm.
Yeah. If anybody else has questions, so some of you guys have joined recently, you can definitely post it in the chat. But actually, Linda, I wanted to ask you just some things just from your experience, because you were married 32 years, and that's
Mhm.
like the dream, that not that many people reach. And I liked in your book how you talked about you guys were sitting, you had some kind of like a get together with friends, and you guys were the only ones that were together after however many years.
Mhm.
Sorry, Maverick is happy. Um, so yeah, I guess anything that you want to share on like how it was, things that you've had to overcome. What do you think is the key to being together 32 years?
Yeah. I think that you really have to be flexible. You've got to know that and there might be a lot of different types of wives listening to. They might work as well, or they might be a stay-at-home. But to say that the police officer's career comes first is kind of true. And so we have to get past that. We have to get past that hurdle and past that I hate to say it, but past that complaint of just saying, well, their job comes first. Well, it kind of does. I mean, they work in a service industry. If they were a doctor, they would be called in. You know, nurses get called in. People get called in. And I think that we have to jump that hurdle and be like, okay, so if this never changes and he's always going to be called in, different from what his shift is, different than what I planned, now I can know that this is what I have to deal with. And so I'm going to plan out, you know, what I'm going to do instead of being bitter. There's, it's funny, there's a pastor once and he said, have you ever noticed that old people are either really happy or very cranky? And he said, where was the why in the road? What point in their life did they take the bitter route instead of taking the other route to be more pleasant and to be more kind? And I think that right there is, and you can look it up online, it's everywhere. It's a fixed mindset versus a growth mindset. And so if you have a fixed mindset, typically you're a little bit selfish, you don't like things to change, you're a little bit rigid, and you're going to hit your head against the wall for a long time. Or you can adapt a growth mindset, which says, I'm willing to change, I'm willing to learn, I'm willing to grow, and I'm willing to have things changed, but I'm also willing to have a voice. And so that's, again, where communication comes back in, and kind communication can solve a ton of problems. When I was a very young mom, I can remember having my first child, and mind you, like, I played softball from the time I was 8 to 18. I danced, I played field hockey, I ran track. I mean, I did anything athletic that I could do because I loved it. And then we got married and I had my first baby, and we went to a barbecue with all of our friends, and it was at a softball field. And they were all like, oh, you know, let's go play a quick game of softball. And off runs my husband. And I'm there with this newborn going, holy crap, is this going to be my life? Like, am I going to be just, you know, expected to just take care of the child, which of course I loved, and it was just a joy for me. But I thought, this is where it gets weird. And I think that you can either be bitter or better there. And so it was then that I just started finding my voice and just said, hey, like, I took it this way, that you were always going to leave me when something fun comes along, and I was always going to be the one. What about me? I love playing softball. And so afterwards I talked to him about it, and he said, oh my gosh, you should have just said something. I never even thought about that. And so there's the key. It's just like, to be able to talk about things, I think, holds your bitterness at bay and allows you to grab that growth mindset and do something new. Yeah.
I love that story. I definitely have had that moment. Like, I've shared it in some of like my real like captions or whatever. Like, and then when I wrote my guide, the first thing I wrote was acceptance. Like, if your spouse is going to be in this career, like, it's maybe 20 or 30 years. And if they really love it, because my husband loves it, and it was a big deal to him that I supported his career, but it does come with challenges. Yeah, you have to, like, at some point just accept it. But you're right. I mean, it's not that doesn't mean that they have to meet you in the middle sometimes on certain issues or whatever. But yeah, that I love that you just said that. And then it is a choice. It's a choice to have that growth mindset you were talking about, and you have to choose it every time there's a challenge, you know?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Right.
And then lastly, what you kind of were talking about was assertiveness too. Like, I think a lot of times with women, it takes me time. Something will happen, like what you said, like, you're like, whoa, I'm just alone to take care of the kid. You didn't say anything right away. I'm like that too. Like, it takes me time to process it. I'm not assertive, like, on the spot, you know? I have to, like, think about it. Okay, how am I going to talk about this?
Yeah. I think that's good. And I also think too, sometimes we measure our marriage as a law enforcement marriage, whereas maybe what you don't realize, and because we've met with so many other types of marriages, that those struggles happen in every type of marriage, every type of job, just in relationships in general. And so again, like I would not, I mean, I feel like if the struggles are bigger and the talking isn't working, then counseling is always um, we're a really big proponent of that in our family, because sometimes you need another voice and you need another ear, and sometimes it's not police work. Sometimes it's your family of origin and the way you were raised is kind of creeping into your relationship, because remember, you're two different people from two different families, and so you're coming in to a marriage with your own kind of love languages, or maybe what you saw in your family, then you replicate in your marriage, and what he saw in his family, he replicates in his marriage, and so in our marriage. And so it was funny because I it I hope Brian doesn't watch this. But I just have to say, like, he would buy me like beautiful red roses, which is awesome, but that's what his mom loved, you know? And so I would tell him over and over again, like, oh my gosh, I love these wildflowers. Like, I love, like, a lot of my life, especially raising kids and then being a behavior tutor for children with autism, I had a very rigid life. I mean, it was very like, your direction is, this is what, you know, and here are your steps, and this is what we're going to do. And so when I got home, I didn't want anything that was just rigid. I wanted like wildflowers and things that weren't cut perfectly. And I liked kind of like goofiness, you know? I needed that. And it took a while for him to understand that his mom's love language was gifts. And mine is more like words of affirmation or quality time. And so you have to ask yourself sometimes, like, how much of the family of origin is coming in from me and from him? And how can we talk about that gently?
Yeah, culture was one for us that, like, I didn't even realize it, but Rick's mom is incredible, and she was a police wife too, also social worker, so we had a lot in common. But she's Mexican, like from Mexico, born there, but then moved here later. And I think Rick wanted me to be just like her, like cook all the meals. And she'll tell you that, like, she prepared hot meals, every single meal, even though she was also a working mom. Like, she just worked her butt off all the time, and she's incredible. But that just didn't work for me to do that, like, for him. But I still do a lot, but I don't know that I'm like hot meals, 3 meals a day. I just can't, like, it would just burn me out, you know? But,
Yeah.
you know, we negotiated that over time, but it took time, you know, to get to know what I was able to do and everything. So.
Yeah, and what was your family of origin? I've read a little bit about what you posted. You were like a hippie child from Hawaii or something.
I mean, my mom, yeah, like I always just say it that way. My mom's like a hippie. My parents are both from Hawaii. My dad was like a surfer, but also professor. So like kind of casual, but also serious. And then my mom went back to school and was a special ed teacher when I was in high school, but mostly a stay-home mom, like, and worked in like preschools or part-time. And then, like, no, not really. Christianity wasn't really like a part of my upbringing. It's not that they were against it, but they both grew up with it and just kind of chose not to do it. So I would go to church with friends and stuff. They didn't have a problem with it, but yeah. So, and then my mom would make most, like, dinner, I would say. And so it's funny because I still prioritize like making sure I know what I'm going to make for dinner. And I mean, obviously I make food for my family. I post all the time. I love making food, but it's like, it's not necessarily like a hot, like cooked breakfast and lunch too.
Right.
But yeah, I look back and I tell my mom, like, yeah, she really cooked almost every night, and it was a lot, but not every meal, like Rick's mom was saying. Because at the time when that conversation happened, Rick was waking up at 4 a.m. to go to work, really, like, he was working super early shift. And I was like, I'm not going to get up at 4 a.m. and make him breakfast. And I told Rick's mom this we were actually out to breakfast when I told her this. And she's like, you're not? I was like, oh, shoot. And I'll never forget that conversation. You know, it was just like, well, that's your responsibility. Oh, okay. You know, she wasn't being sane. That's just her upbringing, you know?
Yeah.
And I do my best. But yeah, my mom was never a breakfast person, so it was like cereal, like just kind of throw something together. I love
Yeah.
breakfast actually, so I'm definitely more into it. But yeah, it was, but luckily, I mean, other things we had in common, like that she was a working mom, and so so I think there were other similarities about her upbringing, but she worked her butt off, and I can't live up to that. So yeah.
Yeah. Oh, I know. Yeah. Culture definitely defines a lot of things in marriage for sure.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well,
Uh, yeah. No, I wrote down budget.
okay.
Budget because you had asked me about overtime
Oh yeah, yeah.
and police officers who just want to take on a lot of overtime on their time off. And again, that can go on your calendar too, is writing down a budget and agreeing beforehand. We're really big with front loading. So if there's a problem, then you figure out why you had the problem and then you front load the problem for next time so that you don't have as big of a problem. So you talk about it. So you front load when you're not angry, give each other like hours or days. Hey, when can we talk about this? Okay, well, we need to have a budget meeting because you don't really need that much overtime. Let's do, once every other week or something, and we'll use that as our Christmas fund or something like that. I think that if your concern is that your husband's always gone, and there's a trust issue happening, I mean, that's something that we hear a lot. And that's something you just need to investigate. Do the hours match the paycheck? We believe that finances should be open to both spouses, and we believe that passwords should be open to both spouses because you should have nothing to hide. If there's something to hide, that's a bigger problem.
Yeah. Yeah, that's in other marriages as well. And actually Rick will say that he'll have like partners at work that will say that their boyfriend, girlfriend, or husband or wife will want their like to see their phone every once in a while. It's like Rick and I never. I don't need to. Like we were long distance for a couple of years, and I remember a colleague of mine saying like, does your husband ever worry? Like you're a pretty girl, and I was like, no. Like, no, like we just are both very loyal people. And I'm not saying nothing could ever happen, but I just, that's the least of my concerns. But I think you're right, like that their hours, and because there's overtime, it gives that potential for that stuff. And then like the loneliness of wives being home. Yeah, definitely it's vulnerable to that. So that's a really good point. Just like transparency on the budget and passwords. Yeah.
It's a biggie. It's a real biggie. Yeah. Yeah. And the other really big thing for us that helped a lot was just being able to communicate what Brian needed when he got home. So there were many young years when he would arrive home in the early morning, like 4 to 8 a.m. And in that case, it was just like he would eat something and go to sleep. But when he was getting home right after school, the kids wanted him. I wanted him. There was things that were happening. And he finally was able to say, I just need a half an hour to go and take a shower. I've got to wash the day away. I've got to think different thoughts. I need to get myself in a different mindset because I don't want my work to affect home life. But you've got to give me a little time to come down. So it worked out perfectly. Like once you actually just talk about it and go, oh, that's all you need so that you're not a grum? Great, let's do it. And then so he would take half an hour, and then I would, right as soon as he got down, I would make myself a cup of tea and I would go upstairs and read or just get half an hour to myself. It's just amazing what that can do, just to breathe a little. So yeah.
Yeah, I love that. I remember reading that in your book too. That's a really good. Yeah, right now Rick gets home when we're asleep. So I think he like watches TV downstairs and chills for a little bit and then goes to bed. And like we see him like late morning usually. So when he gets up. But yeah, I can relate to that because I'm a working mom, but I'm with the kids. I pick them up right after work. But I would say, oh, so sorry. Getting crazy. But yeah, like I'll just take the boys outside because like just kind of like being outside, going on a walk or something helps me to like just calm down. It's totally not the same stress level at all as being a police officer, but everybody
Yeah.
has stress at work. So
Right, right, right. Yeah, and I think one of the major things about a law enforcement marriage is that you do kind of watch each other. You watch each other for signs of PTSD. If you don't know them, they are in the book, or you can look them up online. You look for signs and symptoms in yourself for compassion fatigue, because we've had some police wives commit suicide as well. So the isolation goes both ways. And yes, you were mentioning at the end of Brian's career, we had a big retirement party during the day, but that night we went out to dinner with like 6 special couples. And yeah, as I looked around the table, I had known these guys for 30 years and none of them were with their original wives. And I said, something has got to change. This is not necessary. And I know that they say that, oh, the statistics for, law enforcement marriage is not actually that bad. Well, there's a lot of them suffering out there. And I think just a little bit of communication, a little bit of counseling, and a little bit of drawing out the core issues, and understanding, okay, I understand you can't process with me what happened at work today, but you can say, I had a really bad day and I'm still processing it, and you don't want to hear the gory details of it. And then, and then the spouse can say, okay, like at least you're talking. Like that's all I need to hear. And so instead of, I think that police wives sometimes batter the conversation a little bit too much. They bump, they batter, they poke the bear. And it's okay if you're just at least getting some communication. And then if it lasts for more than 3 months, where you're finding your law enforcement officer has no joy, has no connection with the family, is isolated, doesn't talk to anyone, doesn't open up to anyone, then it's time to suggest some kind of counseling. And it would be like a trauma-informed counselor, someone who knows PTSD, someone who's aware of police officers, because, and someone who is aware that they are counseling an officer, but also there's a family behind him, which is something that I've run into a lot lately too. They can't just counsel the officer, they have to counsel him with the intent that the family could come in with him eventually, because I think that's more of a healthy route long term.
yeah, that was a lot. Yeah, I'm like, okay,
Sorry,
let's
I'm
process.
feeding you with like a fire hose here.
No, I mean, you really are incredible. I love the calmness that you like present everything with, and you can tell that you've worked with a lot of families in different situations, and you have your personal experience, and like, you're just amazing. I wish we had you, like years ago, because I feel like Rick and I are strong. We're good now, but it like took us time to get here.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, I think that the PTSD, it's when someone was messaging me and asking about communication, I was telling her, like, because Rick is not one to talk. He says talking doesn't help him. It's not that he never talks to me, he does. But, like, I think he's different. And you mentioned something like how you have to look out for each other. Like, I say it like I read him, like, okay, his behavior. And sometimes he is open to talking, and sometimes he's not. And I'm not going to push him then,
Mm-hmm.
And then also, like, the things that he does for self-care are different than what I would do. Like, he likes to work out, like go work out. And that's what like makes him happy, makes him feel better. And he likes just hanging out with us and not focusing on work or talking about it. He wants to focus on the kids and like hang out and just enjoy the family.
Mm-hmm.
And that's, it took me time to realize that, like, oh, it doesn't help you talk because that's what helps me. You can't assume like what's going to help us is going to help somebody else. And I believe him, but it like took me time. So.
Yes, that's so good. That's so good. And thank you for everything that you're doing, Kristen. And the, remind me the verbiage you're using again, the outline that you're giving police wives.
I just call it a guide, but it's like
Guide.
ASIP is the, like, because it's acceptance, self-care, independence, and planning for you, which I definitely think are like consistent with some of the things, like almost everything you're saying, it's like in there.
Uh-huh.
Yeah.
I love that.
but it's a lot briefer than your book. Like I just was putting it together because I get these like DMs from people that are asking me like kind of what's worked for you. So I was like, I just want to put something together that made sense, but it's brief. So compared to your book, for sure.
Good. It's going to be good.
Yeah. But yeah, I guess we'll wrap it up. And then I've been writing notes, and I'll probably create like a little post that's just summarizing things and then telling people to come watch this, even though it is quite long. So that's why I'll summarize it if they can't watch the whole thing. And then definitely tell people about your book and Enneagram. I think that's a great resource. And yeah, I just loved your like concrete tips, like the family calendar, which we have, and actually literally ours is empty. I need to update it right now. So that's a good reminder for me. But
yes. So yeah, and I just want your spouses to know too that the book I can let go really, really inexpensively. So if a department or a group of support wives want to take it on, I can get it for a super low cost if it's over 20 books, I believe. So I would love to walk alongside anyone who wants to do that. And then I do coach individuals. So I coach some police wives, some just, local wives, personally in person or on Zoom. So I'm always here.
yeah, and I think you're very affordable because when you look at other coaches, it's hundreds,
Yeah.
And then I asked you straight up, and I was like, wow.
Yeah.
It's a steal. So.
Oh, well, it's mostly a ministry for us. We have a heart for marriage, and we know that if we help save marriages with, the Lord really leads and guides us. We're a Christian ministry. So we feel like any equipping that he's given us, any stories that he's given us, are not really for profit for us, but so we do run our ministry, and I charge a little bit for coaching just because it is my time, but the bottom line is if we help save marriages, then we help save families, and kids are healthier along the way too, and everything is a win-win.
Yeah. Oh, that's so nice. Yeah, I mean, anyone who's watching, Linda is definitely in it for the right reasons. Like that's how I felt when I messaged you and learned how affordable it was. So thank you so much, Linda. Thank you so much for your time today. And I'm going to save this to IGTV. And then, like I said, I'm going to have another post just summarizing some things that we talked about that I think will help people.
Awesome. Thanks for having me, Kristen.
All right. Thank